Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Much better. My name is Ibrahima Sheikh Diong from the beautiful country of Senegal in West Africa. I am the Executive Director of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. Let me, on behalf of the Fund, but also the government of the Philippines, extend a warm welcome to all of you to this high-level event in responding to loss and damage, focusing how do we scale up not only access but also finances to respond to loss and damage. It is an important event for three reasons why we're having this event. Number one, the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage has seen the day thanks to global solidarity. It's extremely critical at this juncture we keep that momentum so that solidarity will help us to make it accessible but also make it work for the most vulnerable countries. It is important because at the stage of climate finance, innovation, country-led initiative, it is the way we can actually sustain the response in the most developing countries. Last but not least, it's important because the state of demand is such we have to have predictable financing in order to support the most vulnerable countries. And that's why we're here today. In addition to our core organizers, I'd like to recognize the government of Barbados, the government of Palau, but also the government of France for being sponsor of this event. Indeed, the spirit of partnership, which is why this event is taking place today. We have two parts of the event. The first part, we're going to get some declaration and statement from different leaders. And then second, we have the round table, which is the second session, which I'll be moderating. Now, since I'm very bad at time management, I'm counting on you and helping me. We keep the 3 and 2 minutes allocated to each of the speakers so we can get as many people as possible before we leave this room. Our expectation out of this gathering is twofold, is for us to recognize the sense of urgency to respond to loss and damage, but more importantly, to forge the right partnership so we can continue the work we started under the fund, and that's why this gathering is very, very critical. I'd like to recognize also the government of the Philippines in particular, His Excellency President Ferdinand Marcos for being an excellent champion of this fund, having spoken about this fund in many places and its importance. And Philippines, for some of you who don't know, is the host of our board and has been extremely helpful in making sure we actually deliver at the board. And I want to recognize the ministers in the room at some point in the conversation. Now, our fund is one of the most democratic funds in terms of our board. We actually do have co-chairs, one from developing countries, one from developed countries. So to get the conversation going, I'm going to invite our two co-chairs to say a few words before we proceed for the rest of the conversation. I am going to actually call for Richard Sherman, who is the co-chair representing developing countries, for his statement. Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ibrahima. Distinguished colleagues, delegates, ministers, excellencies, the former COP presidencies, the incoming COP presidencies, thank you, and the government of the Philippines, thank you very much for hosting this important meeting. I think we must conclude that this is not the time to be timid or to be scared by minority voices, even if they're large and powerful. Loss and damage is happening. Climate change is a reality. If we don't massively support scaled-up financing for adaptation and resilience, we are looking at a future that we can't even begin to imagine. The kinds of losses that we've seen right now, the poverty eradication, that is not being reduced, it's getting larger. More and more people are becoming poorer, rather than we're not eradicating poverty. So the loss and damage, the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage is the frontline institution to support developing countries to become more resilient. We look forward to kickstarting the operational phase of the fund's work, hopefully later this year, early next year, where we can start funding real projects, real responding to loss and damage, and we look forward to future cooperation with member states and parties, both those developing countries who will use the fund and the developed countries that will contribute primarily as the main support base of the fund. So thank you very much for joining us, and let us remind ourselves, now is not the time to be timid. We need to be brave and bold, and this is the fund that can help developing countries respond to loss and damage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard, and I hope you can inspire the rest of the speakers and keeping it to less than 2 minutes so we can cover as many as possible. Let me now invite co-chair Jean-Christophe Danelli for his statement. Jean-Christophe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ibrahima. And let me first thank the government of Philippines for organizing this event, but also for your hosting of the board of the fund, and certainly for your ceaseless commitment in favor of this fund. So thank you very much. At this point, I would like to emphasize the fact that the fund is really at a crossroad here. We have been working hard to build its institutional foundations over the last year and a half. And now we need to get operational. We need to launch what we call the Barbados implementation modalities, the pilot phase. The board has decided to launch by the end of this year. We have one more step to take, which is to launch this program. Why is it important? Many reasons, but certainly 3 of them. The first is for the vulnerable countries and vulnerable communities. It's quite crucial to see funds flowing out of this fund, 250 million first, and then probably in the second batch, 200 or 250 also. So that's quite crucial for these vulnerable communities. The second one is political. We need to keep this political momentum that was built in Sharm el-Sheikh, in Dubai, in Baku. And this event obviously helps to that, but to go further than that, we have to launch this initial phase. And thirdly, and it's quite important for me as co-chair of the board, is because we need, institutionally speaking, to have this pilot first phase launched very quickly for this fund to be able to develop its activities. And I would insist myself on that third reason. We'll leave other speakers here to speak about the political commitment and the need for vulnerable countries. But the third reason is quite important for me, because this fund, we decided at the board level to build it on listening to vulnerable countries. We decided to do it in a bottom-up, country-led ways from the start. And that's important to keep it that way, and this is why within this program we are going to launch a call for proposal. And the second reason is that this is a new fund, but this is certainly not the only kid in town. A lot of organizations are working on loss and damage, are trying to give a correct response to loss and damage. They are not able to do it. They need more, they need us probably, but we need us as well. So it's important to learn from the ground how we can work with these other organizations, what we call the funding arrangement, and this pilot phase is quite critical for that. So let's keep the momentum. Let's launch the BEAM at our next board meeting, and good luck to the fund. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe. Loss and damage is indeed a reality. We're at the crossroads. We need to flow funding to where it's needed, but more importantly, we need to keep the momentum. So what got us to where we are today will help us to get to the finish line so the countries can see the impact of this fund. At this junction, I'd like to invite our keynote speaker, Her Excellency Ma Teresa Lazaro, to address, she's the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Philippines, to address us. Madam Secretary.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister of Tuvalu, the co-chairs of the board, excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, and thank you for your presence and partnership today. It is my honor to deliver this message on behalf of His Excellency President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., President of the Republic of the Philippines. The Philippines hosts the board of the fund for responding to loss and damage with the authority of lived experience, knowing firsthand the costs of climate change. In this role, we speak not only as one nation, but as part of a wider community affected by loss and damage induced by the climate crisis. Across regions, loss and damage takes many forms. In Bangladesh, rising seas displace millions and ruin farmlands. In Fiji, in the village of Vanidugula, moved inland, losing ancestral homes to the sea. In Pakistan, the 2022 flood submerged a third of the country, affecting 33 million people and causing over $30 billion in damages. Across Africa, Latin America, the Pacific and Himalayas, climate impacts from mounting costs and destroyed harvests to eroding territory and traditions have disrupted lives and economies. Excellencies, these losses, though experienced locally, reverberate globally. A flooded field in Asia raises food prices worldwide. A collapsed port in the Caribbean disrupts shipping and insurance markets. A vanished Amazon forest weakens the planet's capacity to regulate climate for us all. From 2000 to 2019, climate events cost $2.8 trillion in losses, about $16 million per hour. In 2024 alone, disasters inflicted $320 billion, with less than half insured. By 2050, annual damages could reach $3.1 trillion and reduce global incomes by nearly 19%, or $38 trillion a year, far exceeding the $6 trillion required annually for mitigation. Loss and damage is therefore not only a climate issue, but a global economic challenge. Each disaster compounds inequality, worsens debt, strains budgets, and delays investments in health, education, and infrastructure. As host country and member of the board, you recognize the work done by the board in its first year to prepare for the fund's initial implementation phase through the Barbados implementation modalities. We are encouraged by this determination to learn from past challenges and its commitment to innovative, country-driven, streamlined, and transparent modalities. Now it is up to us to ensure that the board's mandate is matched with resources. We call on all member states to stand firmly behind the fund. It must be adequately financed to meet urgent needs of developing countries which bear the social and fiscal costs of loss and damage. We urge developed countries to lead, supported by multilateral institutions, the private sector, and other partners to ensure coherence and complementarity. Resources must reach the front lines in ways that are timely, accessible, and equitable. These include the small island developing states, the least developed countries, landlocked and vulnerable middle-income countries, and climate-affected communities. The fund must now revert to the logic of traditional aid. Its governing instrument requires innovation and responsiveness, not conditionalities that shift risk back onto the most burdened. Support must therefore mean substantial capitalization and replenishment on a predictable cycle anchored in cooperation among states and the wider financing system. For our part, the Philippines will continue to provide the platform and facilities for the board to function effectively. We will work to ensure it remains transparent, responsive, and strategic. We will continue to stand with those who see this fund as a lifeline. As we begin today's dialogue, I invite our panelists and participants to reflect on how the global financial architecture, from multilateral development banks to climate funds and other institutions, can help deliver new, additional, predictable, timely, and accessible finance at scale in the context of loss and damage. Let us also consider how governments, international organizations, philanthropic actors, and the private sector can forge stronger partnerships to reinforce the fund and channel resources to vulnerable communities. And finally, let us ask what actions we can take together to support the fund in fulfilling the mandate, not only to succeed in its startup phase, but to sustain momentum in the long term. Let us give this fund the means to deliver, not only for those who suffer today, but for the stability and security of the world we share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary, for reminding us the sense of urgency and to take action. Please extend our gratitude to the President of the Philippines for his continued support on championing the fund. At this junction, it is the right time actually to share the video from His Excellency Ferdinand Marcos, who will send us a message actually supporting the work we're doing here. So if you get the video, I'll invite you to turn to the screen as you watch the video from His Excellency Ferdinand Marcos.
Excellencies, colleagues, on behalf of the Filipino people, I welcome you to this important gathering being co-organized by the Philippines as host country of the Board of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. I'm sorry that I'm not able to join you in person, and I thank you for allowing me to convey my greetings and felicitations through this video. The Philippines attaches the highest importance to addressing loss and damage due to climate change. It affects the most vulnerable, who are also the ones least responsible for climate change. Like many of you, we know too well what loss and damage means in real terms. For the Philippines, hosting the board is both an act of solidarity with other vulnerable communities and a commitment to help ensure the fund's success. Today's meeting complements the UN Secretary General's initiative that highlight climate ambition through our nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, and the path to COP30. Alongside ambitions on mitigation and adaptation, we must enhance and build up resources to respond to loss and damage. The fund, therefore, needs broad political and financial support if it is to deliver on its promise. Let me thank all of you for the wonderful work that you are doing. The Philippines will continue to stand with you in building a fund that delivers where it is most needed. Its success will be a testament to the strength of our cooperation in climate action and climate justice. I wish you all a meaningful and productive discussion in today's event. Thank you, and mabuhay.
Thank you. I think it deserves a louder applause than that. Yes, you can applaud. I still have a fond memory of my first participation on our board. His Excellency President welcomed us to his house and spoke very vitally, so we're very grateful that that support is continuing since then. Now we're going to move to our next speakers, and it is my honor to invite His Excellency Filetti Teo, the Prime Minister of Tuvalu, for his statement. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Moderator, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. With all protocols duly observed, I am very delighted to offer some remarks and perspective on this very important issue. But before I proceed with my comment, let me thank the Philippines, and a special thanks to the President for the personal invitation to me to actually participate at this segment of this side event. I'm happy to offer some perspectives from one of the smallest and probably the most vulnerable country in terms of the impact of climate change. For those that may not know, Tuvalu is a atoll nation, totally flat. There is no option to relocate internally. So we are highly vulnerable to the impact of climate change, especially climate change-induced sea level rise. When storms do come to my island in Tuvalu, homes are torn apart and family had to seek shelters in school and churches. They also causes salt water to invade our water lenses and food garden, the very sources that sustains us. With each passing year, the encroaching sea claim more of our land that has once held our villages and our ancestors' grave. Communities strive to rebuild, but the losses outpaced our recovery. And this is simply the stark reality of loss and damage to us. The establishment of the Loss and Damage Fund was a recognition of these realities. It gave hope that the world had listened and that the burden of vulnerable communities would no longer be carried alone. That hope now depends on how this fund is designed and delivered. In my view, it must be capitalized with reliable sources. It must be financed quickly because disasters do not wait for bureaucratic procedures and red tape. And it must be accessible to the smallest administrations because families cannot be asked to survive while paperwork and processes drag on. The weight of climate impact is also carried in debt. Each disaster forces us to borrow to pay for recovery. Repayment then strip away budgets meant for other basic needs in health and education. Often before rebuilding is complete, another disaster arrives. The cycle deepens and resilience fades. Excellencies, earlier this year I traveled to Spain for the Financing for Development conference. Leaders in Sevilla agreed that the global financing system must serve the needs of vulnerable communities. They recognize the need for debt relief, fairer access to finance, and the adoption of the multi-dimensional vulnerability index. Those commitments must be carried into the Loss and Damage Fund. The principle endorsed in Sevilla must guide what we built here in New York. Eligibility for finance is another test of fairness. Income per capita hides the fragility of small economies. A middle income label does not describe a country where a single storm can erase decades of development. The Multidimensional Vulnerability Index provides a clearer measure. It recognizes exposure to shocks, structural constraint, and limited capacity. By applying the Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, this fund can ensure that resources reach those who face the greatest risk. The success of our efforts will be determined by the strength of our partnership. Government must lead with resources. Financial institutions must design instruments that match the scale of risk. Civil society must deliver at the community level. The private sector must bring innovation, insurance, and investment. When these elements come together, the result can be transformative. We see this in the Tuvalu Coastal Adaptation Project, our national flagship adaptation project, where international support is helping us build reclamation land to protect our vulnerable community. Yet this project covers only part of what is needed. The cost of safeguarding our full coastline is far beyond our reach. This illustrates why scaled-up finance and partnership are essential. Equity must be the principle, that hold all this together. Those whose action have caused climate change have a responsibility to help those who face its harshest impact. This is a duty that comes with power and solidarity that comes with humanity. In the Pacific, we have spoken with one voice. Through the Alliance of Small Island States, through the Pacific Island Forum, and through the Pacific Small Island Developing States here in New York, we have called for full implementation of the fund, for fair access, for innovative debt instruments, and for partnership that deliver beyond capitals and reach directly into communities. These are the priorities that will drive meaningful change. Excellencies, the true test of our success lie in our ability to deliver. Families simply cannot build their future on promises alone. Community cannot deliver on pledges alone. Finance must move, and it must move where it is most needed. Partnership must function, and they must function for those on the front lines. If the fund delivers, it will stand as a proof that multilateralism can respond to the greatest challenge of our time. If it fails, the cost will be counted in abandoned homes, displaced cultures, and lost trust. Excellencies, as the sea continues to rise and storms intensify, the urgency of our mission cannot be overstated. Let us scale up finance and partnership. Let us ensure that this fund provides security and dignity to those who carry the weight of climate impact. Let us leave this meeting with the resolve to turn recognition into delivery. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for that reality check, but also being at the human face of loss and damage, which I hope throughout our conversation will inspire us to take actions going forward. Very much aligned with a bottom-up approach and country-led initiative of our board and making sure the countries are at the heart of finding solutions to loss and damage. Now, let me at this stage invite an equally important advocate of the fund, His Excellency Selvin Hart, Assistant Secretary General, and the Climate Action Team of the Executive Office of Secretary General. Mr. Selvin, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, my very good friend and our leader on the loss and damage front, Ibrahima. We're really excited about this phase of work. Prime Minister and Excellencies, of course, my two co-chairs, as well as the COP28 presidency that built on the important work of the COP27 presidency. Egypt and, of course, COP29 helped to seal the deal, and we have COP30 where we'll make even much greater progress. The Secretary General has been and remains a strong advocate of the Loss and Damage Fund and the work of its board. In his recent speech a few hours ago, he asked leaders to make 5 critical choices, and one of those choices was climate justice. And within that call for climate justice, he asked leaders to get serious on the capitalization of the Loss and Damage Fund. So there's not much more that I can add to that, but I will still try my best. The reality is that climate impacts, as distinguished Prime Minister and the President of Philippines and others have stated, climate impacts, the pace of climate impacts are accelerating. And one of the great injustices of the climate crisis is that those that have contributed the least are already paying the highest price. And our efforts to protect people and safeguard livelihoods, it's not keeping pace with the acceleration of the climate crisis. And we're seeing it across the world, north and south, but especially in developing countries, and especially frontline developing states. And while we've made, after a 30-year fight that was led by the small island developing states, the least developing countries, and African countries, this fund was finally created. But if we look at what has already been pledged in the context of what is being spent on military expenditure, recently the Secretary General released a landmark report which showed that globally military expenditure in 2024 has swelled to 2.7 trillion. 2.7 trillion, or around $334 US for every person on Earth. What has been pledged, the over 700 million that has been pledged to the Loss and Damage Fund, represents 0.026% of what is being spent annually on military expenditure. Let me repeat that again. 0.026% of what is being spent on military expenditure. So we're really at a moral crossroads here. A crisis that countries did not create. They're being battered. Their people, their economies are being battered by the climate crisis. And in parallel, countries are making spending record expenditure on military. So we're really at a moral crossroads here. So as we move into COP30 and beyond, I really wish to reiterate the Secretary General's call. We need to get serious on loss and damage. We need to get serious on climate justice. We need to address and attend to the needs of those on the front lines. The technologies are available. The finance is obviously available. But we need to get serious. And as one of the speakers said, this fund needs stable, as you know, despite the good work that the co-chairs have been doing with the BIM, Barbados implementation modalities, and trying to get the fund up and running as quickly as possible. These efforts will be frustrated if the fund does not have funds. So it is critical that we get serious about providing financing. The climate crisis is not waiting on us to get serious about climate finance. It is not waiting on us to get serious about capitalizing this fund. So my strong encouragement, let's get serious as we head towards COP30. I thank you.
Thank you. Selvin, I never heard put it that way. The fund does not have fund. Indeed, it needs to be highly capitalized so we can meet the demand. Selvin, I know you have to go. We'll excuse you for your next commitment. Let me now invite His Excellency Gustav Arturo, Minister for State and Public Affairs of Palau, one of the sponsors of this event as well. Honourable Minister.
Ali, thank you very much, moderator. Ali from Palau, distinguished co-chairs, colleagues, Your Excellency Prime Minister, Excellencies and colleagues. For small island developing states, the provision of climate finance for addressing our loss and damage has been a core priority since the establishment of this international climate change regime since 1992. In 2022, it was a turning point on this topic when the international community officially, 1, recognized the need for distinct climate finance for responding to loss and damage for developing countries, in particular SIDS and LDCs, and 2, established a new fit-for-purpose fund under the international climate change regime, which would play a central role in the broader architecture of new and existing funding arrangements. Excellencies and colleagues, governing this climate-induced loss always has a price tag associated with it. no matter if it is expressed in economic terms, like loss of GDP, or non-economic terms, like the loss of cultural heritage. Because while livelihoods, and the environments are priceless to us, we still have to finance activities seeking to remedy any temporary or permanent loss to these cornerstones of our existence. As a result, this new fund, the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, is not only a symbol of multilateral progress on these matters, but also the first dedicated partner for assisting developing countries in orderly governing our climate-induced loss. So for SIDS, the FRLD now must come into its own. Its board, supported by its secretariat, must breathe life into the words on the pages of the fund's governing instrument. The following are some actions that therefore need to be taken urgently to achieve this outcome. Substantial capitalization of the FRLD to meet the pressing needs of developing countries. This would be done through the immediate encashment of the initial pledges and the urgent launch of its first periodic replenishment process. This capitalization will also go towards the achievement of the new climate finance goal, NCQG. Second, urgent development and approval of the FRLD's access modalities. This is to ensure that the fund's resources can promptly get to the essential, on-the-ground activities seeking to address climate harm in developing countries like SIDS in ways that also build sustained capacity and national systems to govern this loss in these very countries. This therefore requires the prioritization of true direct access, including through direct budget support to national governments over the use of international access entities. And thirdly, urgent operational of the FRLD's permanent secretariat. This would involve staffing of all required personnel needed for the fund's prompt execution on its mandate and operations, while ensuring geographical and gender balance as well as cultural and linguistic diversity. Excellencies and colleagues, in closing, I would like to highlight that we are at a pivotal moment in the history of this fund. So my message to the FRLD and all its key stakeholders is for you all to be courageous and pioneers while keeping the original purpose always at the front of mind. SIDS are counting on you all to urgently push forward and live up to the FRLD's standard of leaving no one behind. I thank you all and Gopam Sula.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your intervention. At this stage, I'd like to invite Her Excellency Dr. Amna bint Abdullah Dawag, Minister of Climate Change and Environment of the United Arab Emirates. Your Excellency.
Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you today to identify ways to address loss and damage more effectively. And on behalf of the UAE, I would like to thank the Philippines mission for giving us the opportunity to be part of this most important dialogue. With every unprecedented weather event that occurs, we are reminded in the most painful way that we are not yet on the top of this crisis. For the global south, the threat of the next drought, flood, or hurricane is ever present. It dampens ambitions, hinders planning, and weakens growth and destroys hope and dreams. And we have the responsibility to protect our most vulnerable countries. The countries that are the most at risk, yet have the lowest carbon footprint. That protection should not be held back until disaster strikes. We must create a robust framework of partnership and finance that makes for an exceptional global response to loss and damage. The UAE has garnered global support to enhance the international loss and damage response. As host of COP28 in 2023, we operationalized the Loss and Damage Fund at the very first day of COP. And in 2024, we hosted the first board meeting of the Global Climate Fund for Loss and Damage. We have also launched large-scale global initiatives like the Mangrove Alliance for Climate that have been instrumental in protecting coastal communities from the impact of climate change, and forged partnerships that drive low-carbon socio-economic progress. One such partnership is our landmark solar wind batteries agreement with the government of the Philippines. Loss and damage is not just about responding to a situation when it occurs. It is about supporting the most vulnerable countries to improve their capabilities in assessing and managing loss and damage, specifically through risk management and resilience building initiatives. To achieve this, we must work together to expand our capabilities and financial capacity. In the case of the Philippines, the UAE world-class renewable energy capabilities combined with Philippines' natural resources makes for a partnership that enhances global renewable capacity in line with the UAE consensus. And as Her Excellency have mentioned, and according to the 2025 UN report, the full extent of global disaster cost now exceeds 2.3 trillion annually, disrupting education, supply chain breakdowns, and lost livelihoods have domino effect that impacts the entire world and is not restricted to regions by themselves. And as a mother, I want to protect my children. I want us to protect our children. No one, young or old, should live in fear of what tomorrow is going to bring, especially in the face of crisis. And as a government minister, I recognize the sheer scale of the impact one disaster can have on the entire world. And by scaling up finance and building strong partnerships, we can chart a course toward long-term economic stability. Ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to discussions that will inspire all of us and will make sure that we continue to be on the right course of action to achieve our collective goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Indeed, since the decision was made in Dubai to open the fund, and as we bid farewell to the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, it has been indeed a journey whereby within a year, we actually do have a functioning board, about $788 million pledged by different partners, Philippines hosting our board, and the World Bank hosts the Secretariat. So it's been a great journey, but a journey that's certainly just beginning as we pursue. Let me now invite His Excellency Mukhtar Babayev, Representative of the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan for climate issues.
Thank you, Ibrahima. Excellencies, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Our gratitude to His Excellency President of Philippines for bringing us together. Philippines consistently shown real leadership on this vital topic. And the last year in Baku, we were proud to hold the signing ceremony for the host country agreement between the Philippines and the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. Dear colleagues, we have made important progress on loss and damage over the past few years, including COP27 in Egypt and COP28 in United Arab Emirates. The milestones we reached last year on loss and damage are one of the proudest achievements from last year in Baku. As a COP29 presidency, we have urgently called for more pledges to the fund. At COP29, we were delighted to see both Sweden and Australia make new contributions to the fund. We will continue to call for more donors to step up and for donor countries to convert their pledges into concrete funding. We also need loss and damage actors from within and outside of the UNFCCC ecosystem to work together better. That's why we launched a new high-level dialogue to coordinate these efforts. This will maintain the attention of senior leaders, and it will bring different actors together in new partnership. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we have made strong progress, but we still need to go much further on loss and damage. This topic has been one of the top priorities as the COP29 presidency and also will be in the center of the attention at COP30 in Belém. And we will continue to champion this issue going forwards. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. At this stage, I'd like to recognize we've just been joined by the Secretary of Environment of Natural Resources Philippines, His Excellency Rafael Lutila. Thank you, Your Excellency, for joining us. Now, let me now invite Her Excellency Henrietta Elizabeth Thompson, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary for Climate Change for Barbados, home of the launch of the BIM of FRLD. Your Excellency.
Thank you so very much, Executive Director, distinguished members of the Head Table, Prime Minister, Secretary of the Philippines, representatives of Palau, and the previous co-chairs, the previous COP presidencies. Let me greet you all. And I have left our co-chairs for last, because as a member of the board of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, Barbados wants to particularly salute the extremely hard and unwavering effort that the two co-chairs have made to bring us where we are today. And I salute you, I recognize it, and I say it formally so that it becomes a part of this record. Because when things are accomplished, often we salute the result, but fail to recognize those who have worked to bring us here. In that regard, please let me also thank the Philippines for their absolute graciousness and generosity in the way that they have hosted board members to date. We look forward to the 7th board meeting, which will take place in about 2 weeks. Let me observe, if I may, that the road to where we are has been a long and tortuous one. There are those who have worked in climate change for so many years that we did not think that we would see this fund ever established. My first climate meeting was Kyoto. Yes, I know that surprises some people, but yes, my first climate meeting was Kyoto. At COP27, we had agreement on the fund. At COP28, we had more formal establishment. At 29, we had the executive director and the signing of the host agreement. And I think that the question before us here today is, what do we anticipate for and what do we want of COP30? And I want to suggest to us that there are 3 things which we as a community longing to see this fund properly operationalized and fully mobilized in support of all those who desperately need it. There are 3 things which we need. We need to have accessibility, we need to have adequacy, and we need to have certainty. Now, let me elaborate on these 3 points. We have the Barbados implementation modalities, the BIM. We now have to ensure that these become a deliverable platform for making the fund operate and reach those who need it. Adequacy, therefore, includes grant funding. It must ensure that the fund reaches everybody. You see, the raison d'etre for this fund was that those who were excluded from other financing mechanisms, those who could not access the SIDS, the LDCs, those countries which were on the front lines of climate change but received no funding, would have an open door to access the resources. And therefore, adequacy of resources means reaching those who need. It means scaling up in a world where we know that the response must be in the scale of the trillions, and yet the fund is barely past $500 million. So adequacy and accessibility are tied together and must connect to delivering and deliverability. And certainty means that we have to work together as advocates, creating new innovative mechanisms and certainty to ensure that the funds reach those who need it. We are in polycrises, and we've had a fund that has been established, but no one has been able to draw a penny from it in situations where we see on television the multiple assaults of climate on countries and on their citizens. So we know that the fund is urgently needed, and therefore there has to be some degree of certainty in relation to how much resources and adequacy, how soon people will be able to access them, accessibility, and where those resources are going to come from and when. We cannot exist in a sort of fairyland which says that resources are needed and the fund must be bigger without knowing where the resources will come from. We know from recent court decisions that climate and the responsibility for climate is not just a moral imperative. It is not just an imperative for those who are on the front lines. We know now that the law courts of our world regard it as a legal imperative. And if climate change funding and climate change protection is a legal imperative, so too must loss and damage funding. The connection is absolutely clear. You cannot have a court decision or international court decision saying that there is a legal imperative relative to climate change behaviors and climate change practices and climate change cause and not accept that there is equally a legal obligation to address and fund loss and damage. No one must be left behind. No country and no person must feel that the fund is not for them. We intended, when this fund was established, to see it as a place or a moment of hope. COP30, therefore, must find a way for that hope to be fulfilled in the proper capitalization of the fund. I know there are many people to speak, but that is the core of what I would like to share with colleagues today, and I'm much obliged to you, Edie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Now, after the perspective of COP28 and COP29, I'd like to invite Ambassador Wael Abdelmak, Special Envoy on Climate Change and Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs of Egypt, for a short statement.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, it's a pleasure to be here to make a few remarks on the issue under consideration now regarding the fund for response to loss and damage. And I must join Her Excellency, the Ambassador speaking before me, in congratulating my dear friends Richard and Jean-Christophe for the valiant work they've done in bringing this board to move forward and to finally make the delivery that we also anticipate. I appreciate the remarks made by His Excellency Minister Babayev in acknowledging that this has been a long journey to bring us to the moment, the positive moment at which we are right now. I recall vividly, as COP President Representative, our very difficult negotiations to actually get the issue of loss and damage on the agenda in the face of severe resistance by many. But I'm glad that at the final moments, good people came together and found that agreement. And it was actually a pleasant surprise for us that we were successful not only in getting it on the agenda, but in actually adopting a decision to move forward on the funding arrangements and the fund, including a fund for loss and damage. And I, of course, need to acknowledge the important work and contributions carried forward from COP to COP to COP at Dubai and further in Baku to bring us to this moment where we're finally seeing the fruits of our difficult labor. As mentioned earlier, resource mobilization is the cornerstone for sustainability and predictability, even more so and always more so in the case of loss and damage, where adequate capitalization mobilization is an indispensable prerequisite for delivering expected and needed support. In addition to signaling a collective commitment of solidarity with those most severely impacted by climate change. We were presented with a number of questions, and I'll try to run through them very quickly in the interest of time. On the first question on innovations to deliver funding at scale, we believe that in order to provide predictability and timely accessible funding, we must ensure complementarity between the fund and the support provided by the financial architecture. Second, we need to learn lessons from other funds and avoid pitfalls on certain policies, particularly those regarding readiness and access. Third, we need to urgently revise access criteria and requirements. Moving to the second question on fostering partnerships, I think this is a very important component of moving forward in operationalizing the fund. We think the UN agencies obviously can provide technical support in assessing vulnerabilities through agencies such as UNDP, UNEP, and UNDRR, for example, whereas MDBs can provide financial intermediation through channeling concessional finance and providing guarantees. But it should be stated that the coherence and complementarity of the roles of all stakeholders is crucial for informed decision-making and effective, impactful delivery. On the delivery side, while delivering on-site and directly to beneficiary entities is, of course, more effective and efficient and would respond to the real needs at the community and local levels, we're also, I think it's worth noting that support to governments allows for a better planning and delivery at scale through a more holistic and strategic approach. Lastly, the third question regarding supporting the FRLD in the startup phase. 3 points here. We need to finalize the institutional arrangements and secure significant pledges for a strong resource mobilization. This is crucial to ensure confidence and predictability. Second, we need to resolve access hurdles and avoid replicating requirements and policies of other funds which proved problematic, and thus provide the assurance of the uniqueness and efficiency of the fund. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we should seek an early demonstration of delivery through expedited funding of high-impact, high-visibility pilot projects with transparent reporting to build trust and signal seriousness through actual delivery of funds. In short, the startup phase, the FRLD needs credible governance, early money on the table, fast and easy access for vulnerable populations, and a demonstration of impact. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your contribution. Let me now invite His Excellency Bojan Kumer, Minister of Environment, of Climate and Energy of Slovenia. Our Minister.
Thank you. Distinguished guests, co-chairs, excellencies, colleagues, I would like to thank the Philippines, the government of the Philippines, for this important discussion on loss and damage. The impacts of climate change are no longer a future risk. They are here, and they are hitting hard. We cannot wait anymore. Actions is urgent. 3 points I want to share with you. First, we need funding that is predictable, timely, and also easy to access. The Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, multilateral development banks, and climate funds must work together to scale up rapid response and prearranged finance using tools like insurance and risk financing to protect communities before disasters strike. Second, ladies and gentlemen, partnerships matter. Governments, international organizations, philanthropists, and the private sector must work together and in complementary with the Santiago Network, the WIM Executive Committee, and other initiatives to make sure resources reach those who need them the most. Local communities must be at the heart of these efforts. Third, supporting the fund is more about the money. It is about getting it started successfully and keeping it moving forward. This means sharing knowledge, providing technical support, and aligning with global framework like the Paris Agreement, the Sendai Framework, and the 2030 Agenda. And let me conclude. Slovenia, as one of the contributors to the fund, is ready to work with all partners worldwide to operationalize the fund, strengthening the pre-arranged and early action finance, and deliver real impact on the ground. Together, we can turn commitments into results for people already facing loss and damage today. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your contribution, as you indicated, and also your financial contribution to the fund. Highly appreciate it. Let me now invite His Excellency Tariq Ibrahim, Minister of Tourism and Environment of Maldives, who certainly knows the consequences of extreme weather conditions. Honourable Minister.
Distinguished delegates, allow me at the outset to express the Maldives' deep appreciation to the government of the Philippines for convening this important side event, and to His Excellency President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. for his leadership. We commend the Philippines for hosting the board of the fund, for responding to loss and damage, and for championing its critical mandate at this pivotal moment. For SIDS, the climate crisis is our daily reality. In Maldives, sea level rise and coastal erosion threatens the very existence of our islands, while coral bleaching is destroying the ecosystem that sustain our livelihoods and culture. These are not sudden disasters alone. They are also slow onset events, steadily and slowly eroding our islands' way of life. The establishment of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage was a historic breakthrough, recognizing the special circumstances of vulnerable countries. But recognition alone is not enough. The fund must be rapidly and sustainably capitalized to match the scale of the needs. Its current resource base is not adequate, and without strong new pledges, the fund will not be able to deliver on its promise. I am deeply worried to witness the troubling trends. Key donors are rolling back on their commitments, prioritizing funds for weapon over well-being. Excellencies, the SIDS targeted support is essential. This must include direct budgetary support that provides governments the flexibility to respond to national needs alongside project-based assistance. The funds must also ensure that resources are timely, predictable, and accessible, particularly for addressing slow onset impacts that existing climate finance has largely neglected. The true measure of the fund's success will be in its ability to deliver tangible support to those already facing the harshest consequence of climate change. For the Maldives, this means financing that reaches communities, strengthen resilience, and protecting our people and ecosystems from a crisis we did not create. We look to the leadership of the co-chairs, the board, the donors to help ensure the fund becomes not only a symbol of progress, but a lifeline for the world's most vulnerable. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for your intervention. Just to close this first segment, I'd like now to invite Honourable Mosese Boli-Tau, the Minister for Environment and Climate Change of Fiji, for the intervention.
Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the establishment of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage marked a truly historic turning point in global efforts to address climate-driven harm. As Minister for Environment and Climate Change, I see firsthand how the impacts of climate change continue to threaten the very foundation of Pacific societies. Villages which could rely on morning walk of a small group of fishermen to bring home a catch sufficient to feed the community during traditional events can no longer bank on their skills alone to put food on the table. Our reefs are changing, the trends in seasons and weather that define our society is in flux. The changes we are experiencing translate to losses and damage that is often borne on the most vulnerable in society. Our subsistence farmers, women and children living in remote communities, and those that rely on our environment for sustenance and protection. The operationalization of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, FRLD, is critical, not just for Fiji, but for all developing countries facing the hard truth of climate disruptions. Parties sought to deliver a different fund that worked differently, engaged differently, and served to directly catalyze national efforts to alleviate loss and damage. We are proud to see our collective perspectives and needs captured in a governing instrument that learns from our experiences with other funds and proactively seek to deviate from the norm. While we welcome and celebrate the pledges that have been made to the FRLD in good faith, we must be pragmatic about the expectation and the needs. A global fund for addressing loss and damage without adequate resources runs the risk of exacerbating an already untenable scenario. We need to be moving decisively from millions to billions and ensure that loss and damage finance is new and additional beyond existing adaptation commitments. Its long-term sustainability will demand innovation, whether it be through innovative levies, private sector contributions, or the leveraging of global and regional development bank capital. Equally urgent to this endeavor is the formalization of the FRLD mechanism and policies that will ultimately enable it to deliver resources to those that need them the most. The FRLD must minimize the bureaucratic hurdles which exacerbate capacity constraint and provide alternatives to the traditional requirements that continue to minimize and limit the reproposition of funds and reach those in need. Strengthening the national response system of climate vulnerable countries is not just an ethical imperative, it is a practical requirement. Innovation must underpin those approaches as we move forward. Pre-arranged financing, contingent credit, social protection system must be leveraged to complement the FRLD grants. From the loss of land, culture, heritage, ecosystem, to the fundamental loss of seasonal trends and crop varieties, what we have potentially lost or lose is wide-ranging, and while we may classify land or reef loss as non-economic due to the inability to price the priceless, we should be clear non-economic loss has major economic downstream implications. In Fiji, our Climate Change Act gives legal weight to our commitment to address loss and damage through its declaration of a climate emergency. With these foundations in place, we have clear objectives to urgently respond to specific loss and damage trends, formalize national response system that build on strong analytical capabilities, and utilize responsive financial disbursement mechanisms. The International Court of Justice, ICJ, has clarified our long-held legal interpretations of the obligations of states and legal responsibility to remediate harm arising from the breach of these responsibilities. This framing provides an overdue and important basis of clarification, gravity of responsibilities at this critical stage in the global response to climate change. Excellent. With this context, the FRLD provides a multilateral solution based on solidarity and the potential to preserve trust in our ability to collaborate. We must use it for this purpose and invest in the vision it seeks to maintain.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, and that brings us to the end of our first segment of this event with very strong messages about the human face of loss and damage, the important sense of urgency in addressing the problem, but also the need to capitalize the fund given the needs that we have across the developing world, but also access, as many have mentioned that, and the fact that complementarity and building solid partnership is key to success. Now, we're going to go to the second side of the event, which I was drudging, because time management is going to be critical. We have a long list of speakers, and I'm pleading with you to make sure we stick to at least a minute and a half, and as they say in Nigeria, I beg you, so that we can at least get as many people as possible, at least to make a statement. Now here, the focus is very precise. This is really where we want to focus on building partnership, but also any recommendation you may have in enhancing response to loss and damage. So there's a broader conversation, but we just want to focus on strategic partnership, which is very much aligned with the commitment of our board in making sure that partnership is part of the solution. So I'm going to go to the list of speakers, and again, as I said, I really insist that we keep it very, very short so that we can get as many people as possible. Let me start with Her Excellency Katerina Stach, Director General at the FRLD Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany, and thank you for the contribution of Germany to the fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, indeed this event could not be more timely as we witness all the drastic impact of climate change threatening communities, women, children, and men. And it's very clear that we need bold steps and comprehensive investments, both in mitigation and in adaptation and resilience. Excellencies, Germany has been putting a strong focus on supporting climate resilience in developing countries for years, and we remain committed, and I can also say this for the new government. And with the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, an important milestone has been reached. We do look forward that the fund will take innovative approaches that help develop tailor-made solutions for the most vulnerable and ensuring country ownership. I think that's very important, and in this context, I welcome the fund's focus on LDCs and sits as an important signal of solidarity and support. It's also very clear that more support for the loss and damage architecture will be needed in the future. As, and it has been said today before, the main historical polluters, the industrialized countries, and increasingly also the emerging economies have a special responsibility. Excellencies, it is my honor to be able to say that Germany has already contributed substantial amounts to the fund and is one of 3 of the largest donors. And as we heard also from Honorable ASG, indeed, the fund needs funds. And we do hope that more contributors will support the fund in the future. Let me briefly highlight 2 points. Number 1, we need the fund to be fully operational and deliver results. And as a board member, Germany stands ready to bring the fund's modalities to life. And we are looking forward to the board meeting in 2 weeks' time, which will be decisive. And we really strive that the fund will be gives financial support to the most vulnerable, and we want to make sure that the fund works in a complementary, coherent, and comparative manner with other initiatives and funding arrangements that already exist in the support landscape. Number 2, we need to address gaps, and we need fresh, highly innovative solutions to address the existing challenges. And I would like to conclude in saying that we need to draw on the experiences and priorities of the countries most affected. And I would like to thank the Philippines, and I think we can really learn from your experience and from what you did and how you used innovative approaches. So thank you very much in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director General. And I'd like to invite His Excellency Chung Kyung, Ambassador and Deputy Minister of Climate Change of South Korea. Your Excellency.
Excellencies, colleagues, we echo many of the points already raised in today's discussion. In that spirit, allow me to highlight three priorities that the Republic of Korea sees as essential for the fund as it enters its startup phase. First, scaling of resources. The gap between needs and pledges remain wide. We must broaden the circle of contributors, countries, multilateral development banks, and philanthropic partners, and ensure commitments are delivered on time. Second, ensuring complementarity. As our Egyptian colleague has just mentioned, the fund should work hand in hand with existing mechanisms, including the Warsaw International Mechanism and the Santiago Network. In particular, strong coordination between the Loss and Damage Fund and the Green Climate Fund will help avoid duplication, unlock synergies, and channel resources where they matter most. Third, building long-term resilience. Beyond immediate relief, the fund must strengthen institutional capacity and link with existing national tools, such as adaptation plans and disaster risk strategies, so that support for loss and damage is embedded in broader development priorities. Korea is firmly committed to advancing climate finance. As host to both Green Climate Fund and Global Green Growth Institute, we continue to support their missions and foster global cooperation. Through green ODA projects, Korea also helps build adaptation capacity and reduce disaster risk. Last year, we pledged $7 million to the Loss and Damage Fund, and implementation is now underway. Korea is also proud to serve as a champion country of the Coalition for Addressing Sea Level Rise and its existential threat, which brings greater international attention to the plight of island nations facing rising seas. The early success of the fund will be measured not only in pledges, but in tangible results that build confidence and trust. By demonstrating impact, the fund can take its place as a cornerstone of our collective response to loss and damage. The Republic of Korea looks forward to working with all partners to turn this vision into reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Let me now invite His Excellency Mohammed Nasheed, Secretary General of the V20 Secretariat.
The Chair, Government of Philippines, the co-chairs, Excellencies, distinguished guests, delegates. Firstly, thank you, the Government of Philippines, for convening this gathering. The global financial safety net was created to insure against crises, to provide financing when shocks hit, and to incentivize sound policies that prevent imbalances. Yet sadly, access remains deeply uneven. Low and middle-income countries, including many in the Climate Vulnerable Forum and the V20, have far less resources than wealthier nations. This leaves the most climate-vulnerable economies exposed at precisely the moment when assistance is most urgently needed. It is clear that piecemeal action will not suffice. We need a comprehensive approach. Anything less will betray the people we represent, the most climate vulnerable nations, communities, and enterprises who already live on the front line of this crisis. The ability to absorb and recover from climate shocks depend on fiscal space, the cost of capital, access to technology, and institutional capacity. Resilience does not come by chance. It comes with finance and capacity. That is why, out of our V20 finance ministers of the Climate Vulnerable Forum, worked with the G7 presidency of Germany at the time to build the global shield. We thank Germany. But let us be very, very frank and candid. What exists today is only a beginning. We urgently need an upscaled G7 V20 global shield against climate risks, one robust enough to protect against losses that vulnerable countries cannot adequately prepare for and cannot adapt to. Excellencies, colleagues, our people deserve more than words of concern. They deserve a safety net that catches them when shocks strike and financial systems that enables them not to merely survive, but to prosper. We need a well-resourced fund for responding to loss and damage, with clarity on delivering, as my friend Ambassador Liz Thompson from Barbados had pointed out. As it is, as the Deputy Secretary General pointed out, it's a fund without funds. On behalf of the CVF V20, representing 1.7 billion people in 74 of the world's most climate vulnerable states, I thank the government of the Philippines again for its steadfast leadership and partnership in driving this agenda forward. Together, I still believe we can deliver a financial system that matches the urgency of our times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this stage, I must confess that I'm not managing the time well. So I'm hoping that the future speakers will help me out so that we can get as many speakers as possible by keeping it short. Let me now invite Mr. Kamal Kisore, Assistant Secretary General and Special Representative Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction. Kamal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Executive Director, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Over the last 2 decades, we've made progress in reducing the loss of lives from disasters, but on all the other indicators, whether it is number of people losing houses, their livelihoods, forests being burnt, we are going in the wrong direction. If we have to make meaningful progress on addressing loss and damage, let me suggest 3 things that we need to do in addition to a lot of good suggestions that have been made by earlier speakers. First, we need to invest in strengthening local and national frameworks and systems. This means enhancing the ability of vulnerable countries and communities to assess and address loss and damage through robust data ecosystems, inclusive processes, and complementary finance to scale impact through the FRLD. In that context, we've worked with our partners, UNDP, WMO, to recently launch a new data system to help countries better track disaster-related losses and damages. Second, we must integrate technical assistance and policy coherence. We invite developing countries to leverage the Santiago network for loss and damage to receive foundational technical support. This will include aligning national climate and disaster risk reduction strategies through a comprehensive risk management approach. And finally, it is really important that we integrate climate resilience in all financing of development. Otherwise, we will be only just responding and not building resilience for the long term. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kamal, for keeping it short. Let me now invite Ms. Kani Winyaraga, Assistant Secretary General, Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific. And I hope I did not pronounce your name incorrectly.
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying our deep appreciation, and not to be taken for granted, that the co-hosts have ensured that we still have a space for this conversation at the General Assembly and in these side events. 3 points from UNDP. First, we agree that complementary financing is essential, but first, please, do fund the fund. This is first mover, and behind it must then come low-cost borrowing, SDRs, parametric insurance, and all the rest of it. Second, our work in country shows that locally led solutions is what grounds and influences change, whether through policy adjustments, more precise financing, and new infrastructure design. And as the PM of Tuvalu knows, raising Tuvalu is a good case in point. And third and finally, loss and damage is indeed a global climate justice project, a promise, as our ambassador from Barbados reminded us, and it must be capitalized fast. Now, there are different ways to say this, but I'm just going to use Selvin's words. Let's please get serious. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now I'd like to invite Ms. Rania Daga Kamara, Assistant Executive Director for Partnership and Innovation at the World Food Programme. Rania, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Executive Director. I'd like to start by joining all our colleagues and partners here and thanking the government of the Philippines, particularly President Marcos Jr. for championing this fund and this event. Allow me also to thank the board and the Secretariat for the leadership that they have shown in pulling us together. WFP sees on a daily basis how climate-induced loss and damage deepens inequality and drives hunger and displaces communities, especially in fragile and conflict-affected settings. And for us, resourcing the fund isn't a financial obligation, it's a signal of global solidarity. Investing in it, public and private actors, allows us to stand united in our commitments to uplifting the world's most vulnerable, and that no one is left behind in the pursuit of a more just and sustainable future. 3 points quickly. We must keep national governments at the center, and I know we are all aligned on this. 2, that we build on existing mechanisms as we continue to innovate and draw on the lessons we've learned from the broader climate finance architecture. And 3, that partnerships is the key to the success of this fund, and we stand with you in making sure this is a continuum and not a single intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rania. Thank you. And I'd like to invite Ms. Lisa Doughton, Director of Finance and Outreach Division at OCHA. Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. OCHA warmly welcomes the operationalization of the fund and encourages close coordination to ensure our actions are aligned and complementary. Clearly defining complementarity of the fund and humanitarian funding instruments will help avoid gaps and overlaps. In line with the gap-filling mandate, the fund could focus on areas that humanitarian action cannot address, for example, long-term post-disaster recovery and reconstruction. In relevant contexts, the fund budget support to governments could be planned and tracked alongside existing humanitarian response plans to keep efforts coordinated. Creating standard procedures for joint planning where humanitarian actors and fund focal points work together will make response more efficient. Developing common indicators such as speed of assistance, coverage of affected populations, and recovery outcomes could allow both to measure progress consistently. The humanitarian sector has tools and mechanisms developed from years of responding to loss and damage, which can prove instrumental for the fund's operations. These include established standards to ensure aid is impartial, effective, and designed according to international proven standards, technical expertise in forecast-based financing, early warning systems, cash transfers and other innovations, and experience in fragile contexts. Humanitarians have operational reach, access negotiations, and conflict-sensitive practices where state capacity is limited. As we scale up support for the fund, we need to ensure that funds reach contexts of fragility, conflict, and violence. To take just one example, in South Sudan since July, heavy rains have caused widespread flooding in Jonglei, Unity, Upper Nile, and Central Equatoria states, affecting 270,000 people. OCHA partners are willing to draw on our presence, partnerships, and experience to crisis contexts such as this to help the fund reach those in greatest need. Ultimately, to help those most in need, we need to find ways to build global solidarity, as my colleague in WFP mentioned, and fill the gaps in the fund, as well as strengthen climate mitigation, adaptation, and humanitarian response. Much progress has been made in the last few years in relation to responding to loss and damage. OCHA hopes that the event here will help catalyze action and support for the fund, and we stand ready to work with the fund's secretariat and governments to ensure continued learning and progress in the next years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And I'd like to invite Mr. Jagan Chapagan, Secretary General of the International Federation of the Red Cross. Jagan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. At the outset, I would like to thank, of course, the fund, but also Philippines government for your leadership. As we don't have much time, so I will go straight into the point. The first point I would really like to make is to take the funds from dialogue to action. I think it's really important that we go local. We go local to the people who know their priorities. We go local to the communities. That's where you will find most of the innovations. And we have to go local to the local organizations, of course, our own Red Cross, Red Crescent organizations in the country, because they are deeply rooted within their own communities, and that's where the most effective response can come from. Secondly, I think we have repeated this many, many times, that we have to build on the existing partnership and existing mechanisms and existing tools. They already exist. And we fully understand that, of course, as the fund, you will have to manage the fund at the global level. But there are organizations like ourselves and many other speakers who spoke before me who have actually that local partnership rooted deeply in the communities. So let's use those existing mechanisms, systems, and tools to make sure that we actually can operationalize the fund as soon as possible. And I think thirdly, extremely important that we support integrated solutions, because the people's needs and aspirations are integrated. They don't separate their needs and aspirations when they're recovering from the disaster and crisis. And a lot of times as systems, we tend to make them silos. Let's make them together in an integrated way. And that's how I think we will make a real difference. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jagan. I'd like to invite Ms. Dima Al-Kadib, Director of the UN Office for South-South Cooperation.
Well, Excellencies and distinguished delegates, the UN Office for South-South Cooperation highly commends the board and all the partners in addressing climate injustice through the fund responding to loss and damage. The urgencies and the numbers are clear. Severe storms, floods, wildfire, drought, and more are hitting countries in both global north and south, and the data are stark. The economic damage alone could reach $395 billion in 2025, and our resources are inadequate. And as we convene, a storm viewed as the strongest so far this year, Ragasa is leaving devastation in northern Philippines and heading to China. The UN Office for South-South Cooperation, therefore, joins the call for action and at greater speed and scale. And three messages from our side. First, the financing gap is a shortfall in our collective commitment to protect the most vulnerable. Second, the action we take needs to be bold, innovative, and multifaceted, as rightly expressed by many of the eminent speakers. And then third, South-South and Triangle Cooperation are innovating development support and transforming partnerships for development. And if strategically leveraged, they can help reinforce the impact of the fund and strengthen climate action. And as we celebrate the 80th year of the United Nations, the solidarity inherent in South-South cooperation is the foundation of multilateralism and of the future we envision. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to Mr. Ganon Laganda, who is the Global Technical Director of UNICEF Fund.
Thank you, Executive Director, Excellencies, colleagues. UNICEF has one key point. Loss and damage for children is a substantive burden for societies, but most of it remains unquantified. It can start even before children are born. A 1-degree rise in temperature can increase the odds of stillbirth by 5%, and in many parts of the developing world, declines in rainfall are closely correlated with child labor, child marriage, and loss of education. On average, climate disasters displace 7 million children from their homes each year. These are around 19,000 displaced children every day, and in many conversations about loss and damage, these children remain invisible. To protect children from loss and damage, we believe that collective action should include three critical aspects. First, closing data gaps about losses and damages affecting children. Evidence of non-economic losses and damages should not remain an afterthought. We need to bring child labor, child marriage, loss of education, and mental health impacts into the equation. Second, ensuring that critical social services for children, such as education, health, water and sanitation, and child protection, can continue to operate during and after climate impacts. And third, considering specific financing instruments that address loss and damage for children. When it comes to these financing instruments, UNICEF supports the following mechanisms: anticipatory action for pregnant women, small children, and children with disabilities who face risks of malnutrition in the wake of predictable climate shocks; shock-responsive social protection and cash transfers for families before and during climate extremes, so families do not need to resort to negative coping strategies; and disaster risk financing and insurance mechanisms, which can mobilize fast and targeted capital to sustain child-focused services in the event of disasters. Early next year, UNICEF will publish a high-resolution, open-source global child hazard database, as well as case studies from around the world which illustrate child-sensitive responses by governments to loss and damage. We hope that these resources can inform planning and decision-making by governments in the context of child-responsive national priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gernot, for your contribution. Let me now invite my good friend, Miko Olikayen, who is the head of Adaptation Fund Secretary. Miko, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, co-chairs of the FRLD, Executive Director of FRLD, Ibrahima, thank you for invitation to this event. I'm very pleased to be here and to discuss with you and other partners on scaling up finance and partnerships. As the Adaptation Fund, our mandate is to finance concrete adaptation in the most vulnerable countries and communities. And as we know, adaptation and loss and damage are closely interlinked. They represent different points on the same continuum on climate impacts and responses and can be seen as two sides of the same coin. This is why bilaterally between our two funds, we've already launched our collaboration in January this year by signing a letter of intent as a framework to actively identify common areas where we can work together to help maximize the impact of the limited resources that we have available for the benefit of the vulnerable countries we serve. We look forward to working together on the areas we outlined and which will evolve further, such as readiness of developing countries to access climate finance, knowledge sharing on best practices and lessons learned on the linkages between adaptation and loss and damage, joint programming, and advocacy on the urgency of adaptation and loss and damage. Among the multilateral climate funds, we are working actively on complementarity and coherence between the funds, and we look forward to working with you as the newest fund under the Climate Convention. We each have our distinct mandates and roles and need to be mindful of how we can best complement each other. This will be essential for our collective support to countries in addressing the full spectrum of responding to climate change, where adaptation measures are crucial for minimizing potential loss and damage. Among the UNFCCC funds, the FRLD has the unique mandate to address the costs of realized climate impacts. The Adaptation Fund stands ready to work together with FRLD and all partners in responding to the full spectrum of climate risks, from reducing vulnerability through adaptation to addressing the losses and damages that cannot be avoided. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miko. And I'd like to invite Professor Roy Lee, Asian African Legal Consultative Organization, for his short statement. Professor Lee.
Very much, sir. On behalf of Asian African Legal Consultative Organization, we'd like to thank you. We'd like to submit 3 points for your consideration. First, we have heard the good news that the climate finance has increased from 100 billion to 300 billion for the next 10 years. And the fund, within a very short time, by April this year, has reached already 730 million. At the same time, we have heard that disasters has been increasing in the past 10 years. And several panelists have mentioned that the amount is per incident is somewhere near 300 billion. So this means we fall far short from what we need. And also, if you look at the past performance, the delivery of the pledges has been, I understand, is less than 50%. So let's hope that this time we will have a better record to close near to what we really need. My second point is that how to explore additional sources in order to fund the fund. Apart from the traditional way of, for example, the debt swap or the insurance rebate and levies. I understand the task force is working on a scheme including 16 national levies that a portion of it will be allocated to the fund. I think this is a very good scheme, but also it's an extremely difficult scheme because even after the task force come up with a list of national taxes, the local industries
Professor,
will
unfortunately,
object.
we have to wrap up, so if you could
Yes,
just
I'm
keep
finishing
it, please.
it.
Thank you.
And the battle will be at the national level. If you cannot pass the necessary legislations, then it will be only good on paper. Finally, I think the fund should also explore other sources in addition to traditional ones. For example, the ICJ's advisory opinion lays down now a very good legal basis that will enable actions that can be taken at international as well as at the national level. In other words, litigations to make claims. Of course, you have to build up the causations of the damage and the loss. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. And I'd like to invite Mr. Kaveh Zayedi, Director of the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity Environment at FAO.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief, of course. Over the past decade, a quarter of disaster impacts and 80% of those that are related to droughts have been absorbed by agri-food systems. So responding to loss and damage just will not be complete without investing in climate-resilient agri-food systems as the strongest line of defense against a riskier future. Rural communities dependent on agri-food systems and agriculture are the hardest hit by climate impacts, yet they receive a fraction of total climate finance. And that's why the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage is such a critical instrument to close this gap, channeling investments to those who are the hardest hit but most needed for producing food for the world. We just wanted to express to you and to the board, Ibrahima, our absolute support. We are developing methodologies, we're developing all the means to be able to support countries to assess economic, non-economic losses and damage, and we put all of that at your disposal and at the disposal of the countries so that we can get to the operationalization of this fund as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaveh. An apology for skipping you earlier when I was going through some of the UN agencies. Let me now ask Mr. Charles Edward, Chief Strategy and Impact Officer of GCF, the Green Climate Fund, our partner, obviously, in complementarity and coherence. GCF.
Thank you. Unfortunately, Charles had to leave for another commitment, so I'm representing GCF instead. So, Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, it's an honor to join this high-level dialogue today. Allow me first to commend the government of the Philippines, the co-chairs of the board, Richard Sherman, and Jean-Christophe Donnelly, as well as the board for their leadership. The operationalization of this fund is a historic milestone. The fund embodies moral clarity, as those least responsible for the crisis must not bear its cost alone. Yet the scale of today's challenge dwarfs available resources. The Green Climate Fund welcomes the FRLD as a vital complement in the climate finance architecture. As the largest multilateral climate fund, GCF invests equally in mitigation and adaptation, helping avert, minimize, and address loss and damage. We stand ready to work in strategic complementarity with the FRLD, supporting early interventions, coordinated programming, readiness, and risk-informed investments. We are committed to help the fund reach its full potential in the context of complementarity and coherence with the other multilateral climate funds. In this regard, as you know, GCF is supporting the fund's interim secretariat, with our duty continuing until the independent secretariat hosted by the World Bank takes over. No single institution can meet this challenge alone. Our partnerships with UN agencies, MDBs, and regional platforms show how resources can be channeled with speed and scale. Looking ahead to COP30, GCF is committed to building synergies with the FRLD, from joint programming to unlocking private and philanthropic contributions. We believe this new fund should be embedded in a coherent architecture with interoperability across readiness pipelines, local absorptive capacities, and innovative financial instruments. Loss and damage must be addressed as a frontline priority, not as an afterthought. This is about fairness, solidarity, and shared responsibility. Let me close by reaffirming that GCF stands shoulder to shoulder with the FRLD and all countries confronting climate-induced loss and damage. Together, we can scale finance, deepen partnerships, and build a more resilient, just, and dignified future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, GCF. So bear with us. We got two speakers, and then we'll wrap up this event. Let me now bring in Ms. Anita Thomas, and Chair of NGO Committee on Financing for Development, representative to the UN Women First International Fund. Anita, if you are still here. All right, so that our last speaker, just to get the perspective of parametric insurance organization, the Pacific Catastrophe Risk Insurance Foundation, Ayutolu Palu, if you're still here, please, if you can keep it short so we can wrap up, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Indeed, the issue in front of us is critically important to building resilient agenda in the region. Loss and damage are no longer a matter for future consideration. It is upon us now, requiring solutions now for today's reality. Procrastination is no longer an option. At-risk communities no longer have the luxuries of time to wait. We know we have the knowledge to deal with loss and damage. We know we are collectively responsible to act now to avoid turning a natural disaster into a prolonged human crisis. In previous years, highlighting the need to avoid implementation delays that act against the best interests of the beneficiaries communities, I have repeatedly emphasized the need to balance accountability with accessibility when it comes to the designing of facilities intended to operationalize the loss and damage finance in particular. This remains a valid point today, and it was in the past, with the Pacific Island countries continuing to face slow, prescriptive, and politically complex global financing mechanisms while simultaneously encountering escalating climate-induced loss and damage. Big Creek, or Pacific Catastrophe Risk Insurance Company, is uniquely positioned to demonstrate how parametric insurance can operationalize loss and damage finance, enhance resilience, and catalyze donor confidence. Flexibility and agility are required of us if we are to successfully navigate the well-recognized operational challenges the region faces. Pacific Island countries require fast, transparent, and scalable financial tools to bridge the gap between disaster impact and relief recovery financing. I would like to suggest two issues. Establish the parametric financial protection system as fast response mechanisms under the loss and damage via policy integrations into the national system. Effective donor engagement is essential for positioning Big Creek as a regional delivery channel for loss and damage financing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And that was our last speaker for the second segment of the roundtable. Before I invite His Excellency Raphael Lutila for the closing remarks, I want to turn over to our co-chairs. You certainly heard so many themes and topics that are widely discussed at the board, almost in every board meeting. I want to just turn over to you to get your first reaction to what you heard, and so over almost 2 hours before I bring in the Secretary. Richard first.
Thank you, Ibrahim, and thank you, colleagues, for all those interventions. So we're close. That's all I can say. We're very close. We're 2 weeks away from a board meeting. I hope that we would leave that board meeting with a very positive message around how the further capitalization of the fund will take place. It's still going to take a while. That's the one thing. The second thing is I hope we leave the board meeting with a clear indication that we will do things differently and demonstrate how different they are when we adopt the access modalities that were envisaged in the governing instrument that were severely negotiated by our colleagues in the Transitional Committee. That will be the proof. The pudding is the proof. The pudding is in the eating, right? So we're very close to resolving our differences and maneuvering the possibilities a little bit further, and we do hope that we will launch the Barbados implementation modalities and open up a call for proposals or a call for requests from countries. We will be able to support at least 15 minimum projects in the next coming year, and then when we go back to we're not going back to when we go to Zambia in April next year, we may be able to add an additional 250 million to this call that we're releasing, and so we'll be able to demonstrate that we're doing things differently and that we're taking colleagues very seriously on how not to make mistakes of the past. So just bear with us another 2 weeks, and then we'll report back to you at COP, and either we've achieved it or we failed again. And if we failed, we get up again and we continue to do work more and more. But I hope that in this case we're not falling down. We're standing strong and tall, and we're moving forward. But we look forward to one final point. I know you want to leave, Ibrahima. We need the partners and the countries themselves to help us reach the local level. We can't do it ourselves. We're not going to sit in a secretariat in Washington, D.C. and reach the local in the Philippines or in South Africa or in the Gambia or anywhere. That is up to the partners and up to the countries to do that. So we're expecting this is a real partnership and that we're going to do something and you're also going to help us do that, right? So I just want to make that very, very clear to everybody. Thank you. And
Thank you very much, Richard. And Jean-Christophe, over to you for your final
Yes, thank
talk.
you. Thank you, very briefly. Thank you all for your contributions. I heard many of them as being able to be translated in the decision that we're going to take, hopefully, at the next board meeting. And I heard certainly the call for urgency. And my sense is that the best way to demonstrate that we are moving in an innovative, different, timely, adequate way is to launch this pilot phase and to operate concretely on the ground with vulnerable countries and community and draw all the lessons that we can draw for them to develop more broadly and with more funding this fund. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jean-Christophe. Before I bring in the Secretary, it would be amiss for me not to recognize the incredible work that has gone into preparing for this event, the government of the Philippines back in Manila, and the permanent representative of Philippines in New York, our team in Washington, Sleepless Nights, trying to coordinate to get out. I believe this is a round of applause for what they have done. It's been remarkable in terms of partnership with the government of the Philippines. Now, it is my distinguished honor to invite the Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources of the Philippines for the final word so we conclude the event.
Okay. Thank you, Ibrahim. On behalf of the Philippine government, I would like to express our thanks to all of you for participating in the discussion this afternoon. We also would like to express our thanks not only to the co-chairs and the board, but also to France, Palau, and Barbados, our co-sponsors, for their steadfast support. Though the fund is still at an early stage, it embodies the best elements of what international cooperation can achieve when guided by urgency, responsibility, and shared purpose. We will work with the board to ensure that the subsequent meetings will be productive and fruitful. And I can assure you that there will be free-flowing coffee, and I would not have to resort to turning off the air conditioning in order to produce results from the subsequent meetings. We are optimistic that with the cooperation of all, we will achieve what the co-chairs have indicated, and the Philippines will continue to work with all of you to ensure that the fund's mandate is realized. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. We look forward to seeing you in Manila in about 2 weeks. And that brings us to the end of a high-level event on responding to loss and damage, and the conversation obviously continues. But thank you very much for honouring us for being here. Thank you.